short video lesson on flipped learning. And this is your guide to creating a learning culture with flipped learning. Learning culture is one of the 4 pillars of flipped learning. And I'm Helene Marshall, your guide. So let's look at the learning culture pillar. Here are the tenets of the pillar. First, that in a traditional model, the teacher is primary in terms of the source of information. But in flipped learning, we shift that instruction to a learner-centered approach. And so class time is more dedicated to exploring topics in much greater depth, and it creates learning opportunities that are very rich for our students. Students become more involved in constructing knowledge, and they participate actively in class and evaluate their learning in a way that is personally meaningful. So we're going to take a look at all of this, taking a deep dive, and here we go. Some basic principles first. Teacher talk. So the research shows that 65 to 90% of class time is teacher talk. This can be from directions and procedures, explanations and clarifications, or feedback and evaluation. So take a minute to self-assess and think about your own classes. Our next concept is hand raising. There is some soft data on this showing that 80% of the time, 20% of the students are hand raisers. Either they're answering display questions, in other words, they know the answer, or they're providing unsolicited contributions to the instructional conversation, something they feel they want to add or say without being called on, or they raise their hand to ask a question. This could be about directions or about the content. So take a minute and think about the extent of hand raising in your classes. All right, and one more important concept that we need is the layers of the instructional context. So we look at these layers. The first layer is the bedrock layer. And this layer has to do with who you are as an individual, who your family was, when you were born, where you were born. You have no control over that. And we all have our bedrock layer, as do our students. The societal factors are the next layer. And then the societal factors, we have the way the community around you sees you and treats you based on your bedrock. And for our students, there's a big change from their home country to here. It could be any type of change, but they are viewed differently here. And we need to take that into account when we are working with them. But we cannot, again, control the societal factors, right? Now, if you think about your students and their bedrock and societal factors, I call it the hand you're dealt. Although we can't change it, we can help them reach their potential. But many of them find when they are trying to reach their potential through our curriculum, instruction, and assessment, which is up here, that they have speed bumps and that their bedrock and societal factors get in the way of their success. Either they have affective issues, or they may have less prior knowledge than is needed for what they need to do. And of course, English itself, being the medium of instruction in many cases, is a barrier for them. And so we have another layer that we can put in. And this layer is flipped learning. And so through flipped learning, they may be able to access the curriculum, instruction, and assessment in a more meaningful way that really truly can reflect their ability and be less hampered by the many speed bumps that they find in their school experience. Okay, because if there's a lot of teacher talk and other students are raising their hands, that's not the reality for our students. Flipped learning eliminates a lot of the teacher talk and eliminates a lot of the hand raising because direct instruction is farmed out to outside of the lesson, making it more learner-centered, which ultimately helps our students. So take a minute. Now, within the learning culture pillar, there are indicators. The first indicator that you're doing this correctly is by providing opportunities for students to engage in meaningful activities without the teacher being central. So the teacher may have provided instruction outside of class, which they can access. Now, what are they going to do in class? And I'm going to give you just a couple of examples of how I do this. One is my students make their own lessons, their own peer instruction videos, and they share them and watch them and give each other little quizzes on them. Now remember, mine are graduate students, so even though some are non-native speakers, as you see here, they are still quite proficient. So you can use this same idea in your classes, but it would be perhaps not to the level of the kind of peer instruction that my students do. But they can teach each other, and it doesn't have to be a video, but that you can have other peer instruction activities. I also have a Wonderwall. Wonderwall is a place where students post their ideas, their thoughts, their feelings, their questions. They respond to each other, and it's their way of communicating on a regular basis over the whole year, and without me as an intermediary. The second indicator is to scaffold activities and make them accessible to all students by differentiation and feedback. So I'm going to give you just a couple of examples of the way that I scaffold so that all learners are able to succeed. One is you can do concept posters. So students get an example. Here they each got a different example. And with a partner, they have to create a poster, and they share it with the rest of the class. Here, this was math. So the question was, are they like terms or unlike terms? And they have to say yes or no, and in a sentence. And then the second question is how they know that they are like or unlike terms. And then C, if they're like terms and they can do the calculation, they do it. And that's part C. And so this was a way, rather than using a textbook, examples, raising your hand, having the teacher talk. This is all very learner-centered, okay? And this is after they have seen the lesson and worked through the lesson outside of class in the video, okay? Now, the other way is the way we're doing right now. They watch their video lesson and they get feedback from me on each question they answer. And you can see the green are the ones that they got correct, and the red the ones that they had trouble with. This is a question with 31 students. And also they can give feedback. So I can see their score on the questions, and they can rate the video. She gave it a 5 out of 5, which is great. And then but she gives a lot of comments about what was hard for her, what she didn't understand, etc. So feedback in both directions, which enables me to differentiate instruction and scaffold it properly. And then I would like to propose a third indicator. This one is not on your checklist, but I think that we have to always think in terms of creating fertile spaces. So our mantra should be to create fertile spaces physically, digitally, psychologically, and emotionally for learning to occur. So focusing more on creating these fertile spaces rather than on covering curriculum, meeting standards, delivering instruction. Think in terms of this as your main mission in your classroom, and then you will have a true learning culture that will stimulate enrichment and engagement for your students. And as an example of how to do that, I cite this article, Making Student-Centered Classrooms and Letting Go of Control, 2 Benefits of Flipping. And if you read her article, you will see how she creates fertile spaces in her classroom. I can click and show you that article. There it is. It's in Flip Learning Today, a digital newsletter that comes out a few times a year. And this is her article. And when you have time, more time, you can go and you can see all of the wonderful ideas she has for your flipped classroom. And now, give me your feedback and we can discuss flipped learning together.